Darkcast Network, bringing our indie podcasts out of the shadows. It was the early hours of Friday the 13th of October 1978, and 41-year-old Kazi Ahmad was making his way home, a very happy man, having won more than £1,000 or $1,200 at the Regency Casino in Aberdeen. Little did Kazi know that his luck was just about to run out. Kazi Bashiruddin Ahmed was originally from Maulavi Bazar in Bangladesh, but had come to the United Kingdom around 1962, where he had worked in London and South Shields in England, Perth in central Scotland, before moving to Aberdeen in the northeast of Scotland around 1976, where he had partnered with 3 others to open the Raj Dalal restaurant in D Street, a 14-minute walk southwest of the city, which welcomed patrons such as Annie Lennox from the Eurythmics. Kazi had married Saida in Bangladesh, but the couple came to live in the United Kingdom around 1962. The couple went on to have 3 daughters, but around 1976, Saida made the decision to return to Bangladesh with their 3 children, but that Kazi would stay in the United Kingdom and send money home to support them and visit when he could, having last been able to visit his daughters and wife Saida in late 1977. Kazi was a quiet but friendly man and was described as being a good and fair boss who would regularly joke and laugh with his staff at the Raj Dalal. He was also known to be a very generous man, who was always willing to share any good fortunes he may have had at the casinos, which he frequented regularly after the restaurant closed for the night. And so when a chef at the Raj Dalal restaurant, 24-year-old Riyasat Khan, expressed an interest in joining Kazi when he next visited the Regency Casino, Kazi was more than happy for him to join him, and was equally happy to impart any wisdom about gambling he may have. The Raj Dalal restaurant was a very popular restaurant and had many staff, and so the restaurant partners purchased a 3rd-floor flat in Rosemount Viaduct, an 8-minute walk away from the restaurant, to accommodate the staff, and Kazi himself also had a room in this flat. And in the early hours of Friday the 13th of October, after leaving the Regency Casino with his winnings of over £1,000 or $1,200, the flat was where Kazi was heading for, which was a 4-minute walk from the casino. However, he would not be alone. Kazi Ahmad's body was found on the floor of his room in the flat by concerned restaurant staff who hadn't seen Kazi for a couple of days and had returned from work on Sunday the 15th of October around 3 a.m. It was reported in the Evening Express newspaper on the 18th of October 1978 that Kazi had been found blindfolded, gagged, with his feet and hands tied, a wound in his neck, and that it was believed he had been stabbed, although later reports said that Kazi's hands had been tied behind his back and that his head had been covered with an item of clothing. Following a post-mortem, it was revealed that Kazi had actually been stabbed 3 times in the neck and 4 times in the chest by a filleting knife. Following Kazi's body being found and the police becoming involved, a large-scale murder inquiry was launched, which quickly expanded outside of Aberdeen and became a nationwide search for his killer. Following the police making inquiries, speaking with the restaurant staff, neighbours and friends of Kazi, they quickly established that the chef of the Raj Dalal was missing, that Kazi's winnings were missing, and that the chef, Riyasat Khan, would regularly attend the Regency Casino with Kazi. And so, unable to locate Riyasat Khan around Aberdeen, and after speaking to local taxi drivers, it was quickly determined that he had likely fled Aberdeen by train. And so a nationwide appeal was made to passengers who had been on any Aberdeen to Edinburgh train on Friday the 13th of October to come forward with any sightings or information regarding the missing Riyasat Khan. This garnered such a good response from the public that the police quickly started concentrating their efforts in Edinburgh, as staff in a bookmaker's in Edinburgh came forward to say that Riyasat Khan had come into their shop on Friday the 13th and had placed 9 single bets of £100 or $121 each. The staff said that this man had stood out as they normally didn't have customers who put such large bets down, and at one point the manager was concerned if he would have enough money in the bookmakers to pay this man if he won. With it being established that Riasat Khan had indeed fled to Edinburgh, an appeal was made on Friday the 20th of October, a week after Kazi was murdered, for anybody who had taken a train from Edinburgh after 4:30 p.m. on Friday the 13th of October and who may have seen Riasat Khan to please come forward, in an attempt to try to establish where Riasat Khan had travelled to after leaving Edinburgh. Police forces throughout Britain all worked together to try and track this man down, with checks being made at sea and airports, and the Procurator Fiscal in Aberdeen having obtained a warrant for Riasat Khan's arrest, and this having been distributed nationwide too, should Riasat Khan attempt to board a plane out of the United Kingdom, for example. However, despite police forces nationwide working together, including Interpol, and despite Riasat Khan being placed in Edinburgh and appeals being made around the country for anyone to come forward if they had seen him outside of Edinburgh, it appeared that Riasat Khan had simply vanished, and he wouldn't resurface again until May 2016, despite attempts being made over the years to locate him. Back in Aberdeen, friends and colleagues of Kazi were in shock by what had happened, with former employee Abdul Muslin saying in the Press and Journal newspaper on the 16th of October 1978 that he could see no reason why anyone would want to kill Kazi, and that everyone in and around all the Asian restaurants were shattered by the news. But the most shattered and shocked of all was Kazi's wife Saida, who was heavily pregnant, and Kazi's 3 daughters. They had lost everything, a loving and supportive husband and a doting father. Saida gave birth to a baby boy 11 days after Kazi's murder. Although Saida was in a state of shock and deeply upset by the death of her beloved husband Kazi, she now had 4 children to look after, on her own, and it wasn't going to be easy, especially as being in Bangladesh, she had no idea what was happening back in Aberdeen with Kazi's businesses. And so she was not able to stop Kazi's business interests being lost, leaving her without any financial support. And tragedy would strike again for the Ahmad family, when not long after Kazi's murder, sadly, one of their young daughters passed away. Life was not easy for Saida, and the added weight of Kazi's murderer not being brought to justice wouldn't have helped. Despite Saida being about 32 years old when Kazi was murdered, she never remarried and focused entirely on bringing up her remaining 3 children as best she could. In May 2016, Saida was a frail 71-year-old who was living with one of her daughters and grandchild, Aisha, in Manchester in England. And it was in May 2016 that Saida finally got the news she had been patiently waiting to hear for 38 years. Riasat Khan, who was now 62 years old, had been arrested. Back in 1978, following fleeing Aberdeen and losing £900 or $1,100 of the money he had stolen from Kazi in a betting shop in Edinburgh, Riasat Khan then made his way to Dover in England via Birmingham and London, some 494 miles or 795 kilometres from Edinburgh, where he travelled by ferry to France. He then made his way through Italy and then travelled to Greece by boat. He stayed in Greece for about 8 months before then travelling to Pakistan. He remained in Pakistan for some time before returning to the UK in the early 1990s, believing enough time had passed and that he had effectively got away with murder. He eventually settled in Cardiff in Wales, where, according to the Guardian newspaper on the 24th of November 2017, he registered with various public authorities and had been living openly at the same address for 5 years before he was detained and arrested on Saturday the 7th of May 2016 at Birmingham Airport as he was about to board a flight to Pakistan. His flight was scuppered by a diligent police officer at Birmingham Airport who noticed that there was a 38-year-old outstanding warrant for his arrest on the system, which Police Scotland had ensured was still in place should Riasat Khan enter or leave the UK, following a review in 2014 of outstanding homicide warrants. Following being arrested in Birmingham, Riasat Khan was then returned to Scotland and remanded in custody, before appearing at a hearing at the High Court in Glasgow, where he faced the charge of repeatedly striking Kazi Ahmad on the neck and body with a knife, of robbing him, and of stealing a kitchen knife from the Raj Dalal restaurant on the same day as the murder. It's not clear if this knife had been taken from Aberdeen by Riasat Khan, or if this was the murder weapon that had been used and left at the flat. And in fact the charge of theft of the knife was later withdrawn. Riasat Khan pled not guilty to these charges, and a trial date was set for the 23rd of October 2017. Detectives and prosecutors immediately began the task of building a case against Riasat Khan, and it wasn't long before forensic evidence collected in 1978 was found to link Riasat Khan to Kazi Ahmad's murder. The trial began on Monday the 23rd of October at the High Court in Edinburgh, with Riasat Khan lodging a special defence of self-defence, and the trial lasted 5 days. Upon Riasat Khan taking to the stand, he tried to blacken Kazi Ahmad's good name by contradicting all other staff members who worked for Kazi and his friends, who said he was a lovely, generous and good boss, by saying, according to the Scotsman newspaper on the 12th of December 2017, that Kazi was a terrible boss who treated restaurant workers like slaves. He then went on to say that in the early hours of Friday the 13th of October, he and Kazi had had a confrontation when he refused to perform sex acts on him, going on to say that Kazi had paid him in the weeks before the murder for such acts. He said that he felt deeply ashamed for having had sex with Kazi, but that he needed the money to send back home. He said that when he had refused to perform these sex acts, Kazi had become angry, and he said he was afraid Kazi would hit him, and so he attacked him first, stabbing him 7 times. He then tied him up, placed an item of clothing over his face, and left, locking the bedroom door behind him and leaving Kazi to die. However, this was countered by police and prosecutors who said they had found no evidence that the murder had been motivated by sexual desire, but instead by robbery, as well as the fact that Riasat Khan had previous convictions for dishonesty. Upon hearing these allegations from Riasat Khan about Kazi, Kazi's granddaughter Aisha, who sadly never got to meet her grandfather, told the Daily Record newspaper on the 3rd of November 2017 that she was disgusted by what she had heard in court. "My grandfather looked after him. He was a poor person, no money and no job, but he employed him and gave him accommodation. It's disgusting how he repaid him." Former employees and friends of Kazi also took to the stand and all said he was a kind and generous man who was well liked and respected by everyone. It turned out the jury also did not believe Riasat Khan's story of Kazi being a horrible boss and person who demanded sex from him, and on the 5th day of proceedings, the verdict of the jury was guilty. Riasat Khan was then led away, with his sentence to be delivered on the 24th of November. Kazi's family were delighted with this verdict, saying that it was what they had always hoped for, but had never thought would happen. Aisha said that it was such a shame that she and Kazi's other grandchildren had never got to meet him, as he had sounded like an amazing man who would have supported them all through anything. Detective Superintendent Jim Smith of Police Scotland's Major Investigation Team said in the same article in the Daily Record newspaper that the passage of time is never a barrier to ensuring that those who commit crime are brought to justice, despite Riasat Khan proving a difficult individual to trace. On the 24th of November at the High Court in Glasgow, Riasat Khan was ordered to serve at least 16 years before being eligible for parole. Riasat Khan was 63 years old at the time of his sentencing and would be 79 years old before being eligible for parole. He had already lived the best years of his life in freedom. Judge Lord Beckett also praised the excellent work that had been done by police officers, forensic scientists and pathologists back in 1978 that had stood the test of time and secured a conviction for murder 39 years later. Riasat Khan's defence solicitor, Gary Allen, did say, according to the Scotsman newspaper in November 2017, that Riasat Khan was very remorseful for his actions and that he is very sorry that at his hands the deceased died, and he is very sorry for the distress which he acknowledges must have been suffered by the family of the deceased. He wishes matters could have been very different. Kazi's granddaughter Aisha said that the family were very happy with the sentence Riyasat had received, but that they weren't interested in his apology. The only person Riyasat was sorry for was himself. Judge Lord Beckett did also ask the prosecution why it had taken 39 years for Riyasat Khan to be brought to justice. While the prosecution were unable to answer this question, it was stated that continual efforts had been made to trace him over the decades, but without success, saying that intel had suggested he had left the UK and that a warrant for his arrest was in place from back in 1978. Judge Beckett then asked the Crown and the police to consider whether any lessons could be learned, with the Crown replying that they were very concerned about what had happened in this case and that any lessons learned would be shared internally and with their external partners to ensure continual improvements in all investigative areas. And that's almost the end of the episode. However, first, welcome to another
Dawn's Digest.
So last episode, I told you that we had launched our Patreon. Well, I can now reveal that we have also launched Scottish Murders merch. You can find our exclusive merch at tpublic.com/user/ScottishMurders. I know we've just passed the holiday season, but there's always birthdays, and who wouldn't love a Scottish Murders t-shirt as a birthday present? I know I would. In the year and a half that Scottish Murders has been around, we've been so lucky to receive such positive reviews. One such being from BB123, who said, "Love the narrative style and emotion delivered in the storytelling. Bad things happen everywhere, but the backstory of the victim and the nuance added is the perfect blend. Really enjoying listening." Thanks BB123 for that amazing review. Every review is not only so appreciated by us, but they also really do help more people find Scottish Murders. So every review is extremely special and important to us. Plus, if you leave us a review, then you might just hear it read out on a future Dawn's Digest. Now, I've got something quite exciting to share with you. If you follow Scottish Murders on social media, you might have noticed that we've been sharing a lot more posts to do with the Darkcast Network. Well, that's because, as of January 2023, Scottish Murders was officially the first international podcast to become part of the Darkcast Network. But not only that, I have officially begun working with Darkcast Network as their international branch manager, where I'm hoping to bring other international shows onto the Darkcast Network too. And I'm pleased to announce that the second international podcast, now part of the Darkcast Network, is Crime Divers, which is a fantastic true crime podcast hosted by Jill and Laura. If you're looking for new podcasts to listen to, then why not try those on the Darkcast Network? You can find all podcasts and details if you have a podcast, North American or international, that you would like to be part of the Darkcast Network at darkcastnetwork.wixsite.com/indie. Speaking of international, here is a very apt review we have received from C$E !@ ! Great name. From the US of A, saying, "I love international cases and was so glad to find a new true crime podcast that covers some crimes and mysteries that I've never heard of. Dawn and Cole are fabulous. The stories are easy to follow and their voices are wonderful. I hope they'll start finding new listeners popping up here in the States and from all over, because I can tell they put a great deal of effort into the show." Thank you for that fantastic review, and you're right, we do put a lot of effort into the show. And so, if you'd like to support Scottish Murders, as well as definitely get a shout out on Dawn's Digest, you can go to patreon.com/ScottishMurders and check out our different tiers. I'm sure there will be one there just for you. So just before I go, there's time to squeeze in another review, and this time it's from Nance Y, and they've said, "Scottish Murders is a great listen. Dawn and Cole make this Scottish crime podcast a fun and interesting listen. Not bad qualities considering some of the grim facts of the cases covered. I've started at the beginning and I'm making my way through. Well done." Thank you so much, Nance Y, for your review, and I'm so pleased you've been enjoying working your way through our episodes. Speaking of which, we have over 50 episodes available now, some of which include us working with other Scottish podcasters for a Scottish collaboration we organised, which took place at the beginning of December 2022. If you've not already, why not have a listen? There are so many fantastic Scottish podcasts out there, and Scottish Murders even featured on a Christmas song by Terrible Music. And you can find it at youtube.com/@terriblemusicofficial9147. And speaking of YouTube, did you know Scottish Murders has started to put our back catalogue of episodes onto YouTube, which includes subtitles? So if you want to read instead of listen to our episodes, you can find them at youtube.com/@scottishmurders. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this Dawn's Digest. Don't forget to contact us on social media or at contact@scottishmurders.com if there's been a special event in your life recently, or you have one coming up that you'd like us to share on a future Dawn's Digest. Join us next week for another Scottish Murders The Shorts episode.
Scottish Murders is a production of Clurin Ton.